Welcome to the Art of Marketing Operations, a Taylor podcast. Here you can grow your knowledge about marketing operations, listen to ideas and strategies to help you scale, grow, and optimize your efficiency, drive your speed to market, and enrich your work life. Let's get to it.
Welcome to the Art of Marketing Operations, a Taylor podcast. I'm Glenn Bottomley, and today my guest is Ross Necessary, Senior Vice President of Global Marketing Operations and Exhibitor Relations at Lionsgate, a world-class global motion picture, television studio, streaming, and gaming company which has produced some of the most memorable Academy Award-nominated films such as Ex Machina, Sicario, The Big Sick, The Imitation Game, and La La Land. Thanks for joining me today, Ross.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, before we get started, I think we have to start out with, what is your favorite movie of all time and why?
Oh my God, it's an impossible question to answer. Well, and there's a lot of ways I could answer it, right? What's my favorite movie as a consumer? What's my favorite movie to have worked on? What was my favorite movie from film school? There's a lot to go on there. Well, I'll tell you. Sadly, I'm going to disappoint. I'm not going to give you one answer, but I'm going to give you a handful of titles that I think are musts. But my favorite guilty pleasure, and maybe this is what leads off as an indication of what my favorite movie is, but I grew up playing golf, big golfer, so Caddyshack is by far one of my all-time favorites.
Of course,
in film school, I was labeled sort of the John Hughes of my class, so anything John Hughes is good. And I think some of my favorite sort of timeless movies are just about anything by Hitchcock, but certainly Rear Window. And then I remember interning at DreamWorks when we did American Beauty, and I just thought it was such an amazing story and such an amazing way to put it all together. And then among my favorite movies to work on have been The Hangover and here recently at Lionsgate, Knives Out. I think Knives Out is a fantastic movie, and it was a lot of fun to be a part of. So, so anyway, I don't have a favorite movie. I have favorite movies.
Yeah, right. That's wonderful. I love that. So many of those that you've mentioned are some of my favorites too. So thanks for sharing that. As you stated, an impossible answer.
It is.
So that's great. But now your role at Lionsgate, it's really, I think, just a fascinating one because, you're managing global marketing operations and exhibitor relations clearly at one of the most influential entertainment studios. You're working on films, television series, digital products, linear subscriptions, over the top platforms, and you're literally reaching just next gen audiences all around the world. So how did you get to where you are today? So, tell us a little bit about your journey.
Oh goodness. That's certainly a loaded question. So I started off as any aspiring, sort of Hollywood, aspiring Hollywood producer or director or whatever you wanted to be. Right out of college, I actually took a little bit of a detour and worked on a Senate campaign. And then after that was done, it was like, okay, time to get a job doing, what we studied. And I went to film school and I had hopes of becoming a producer. And I quickly learned just how cutthroat that is and just how difficult that was going to be. But what was funny about being on the Senate campaign is I find now, as I reflect, how many similarities there are between marketing a candidate or an initiative and marketing a movie. And what I mean by that is so much of it is about selling the experience, not selling the thing, not selling the widget, but selling the experience. Because, in a similar way, when you market a political candidate, you're asking people to spend the next, 2 years, 4 years with that particular candidate in office. When marketing a movie, I'm asking you to spend 2 hours with me. I'm not asking you, as much, when I'm certainly in the theatrical window, I'm asking you to come out and spend time with me. In the home entertainment window, I'm asking you to turn this on and again, spend time with me. And so that's a very different proposition. And with that, you have a bunch of, you have, filmmakers and producers and directors and whatnot who are very opinionated, but a shoe, doesn't care what kind of box it's in, doesn't care where it sits on the shelf. It doesn't have sort of the same emotion that comes with it. But, those were all the learnings that I discovered along the way when I, again, went from working on a political campaign to then working for a studio. And I started off as, my boss's assistant at the time, and then just slowly worked my way up through Warner Brothers, through the ranks there. And I just learned, I took on different responsibilities. Oftentimes I took on the things that nobody else wanted to do, and I tried to turn those things around to make them better. So I started off as an assistant, then I took over credits and clearances, and then I took over print, and then I did some AV, production work. And then I, by that time I had ascended to the point of sort of being second command of the group. So then I oversaw, those responsibilities, but then I was also helping to roll out, new workflows, new initiatives, looking after workflow management tools, applications, and various programs that would help us do what we do, better, faster, smarter, cheaper. And so that's ultimately what then guided me into Lionsgate, because Lionsgate didn't have something as formal yet. They had something similar, but it wasn't centralized, and it wasn't. It was a little bit more taxing for everybody. So then I was able to bring my learnings from my time at Warner Brothers, brought it here, established a lot of things at a global scale that they didn't have yet. And so that's kind of how I got here today. It's a long story, but that's it.
Well, but it's a fascinating story, and I think that one of the things that I think is fascinating about what you're doing is, literally right now, when we spoke before, you are leading marketing operations for 80 some odd plus productions all at once. So yeah, a key question that I think just it begs the question is, how do you keep everything straight in terms of the prioritization of your marketing efforts across so many productions all at the same time?
Well, it's daunting when you think about the volume of material that you're putting through, and like I said before, the fact that each one requires its own proper care and feeding. And that's where, utilization of tools and teams and segmentation of duties really comes in play. And so we're using platforms like Monday.com to manage our, workflow management and task management. We have, robust asset management in place as well, so that when you are realizing, materials that you've worked on, and then once those are done, then where they are, where they've finished. So, and then we've also got, because we're so creative heavy, we've also got robust sort of work in progress dams as well. So again, you're able to see all that content from sort of cradle to the grave, so to speak. And the thing about it is, once you get to the home entertainment world, it all becomes kind of evergreen to some extent. And so, there's the initial push of the initial sort of theatrical release on DVD or electronic sell-through or whatever. And then it kind of quiets down. But sure enough, if it rises to the level, 5 years from now, you're going to have an anniversary, or, 10 years or 20 years or whatever. And then on top of it, you start to bundle things so that we're going to release things as a package around, Valentine's Day or Father's Day or Easter or whatever makes sense, whatever that property, sort of lends itself to. Mm-hmm. So I would say, robust whip dam, workflow management, and a final repository. Those are the things that help you, keep the gears turning and keep aware of what's going on. And I think that some organizations, if they have enough staff, enough resources to accommodate all that, that's what really, that's where, they'll really shine, where they really benefit from.
Mm-hmm.
So, so that's kind of it for us.
I appreciate that the details there. I think when you were commenting, the work in process digital asset management system, very, very important. And I think that's an interesting environment as you described that, because I think that some people who are working in marketing operations may or may not necessarily have the longitudinal focus of their job like you do. Like you say, there may be some 5-year event, a 10-year event or something, which brings that property forward, where having the access, basically instantly to that you can pull it up from an archive and then be able to modify, that asset is an interesting difference, for what you do in marketing operations versus potentially others. And that's what I think is interesting, because I think that marketing operations in the entertainment industry does have some of those similarities to non-entertainment industries, but clearly there are distinct differences, one such as you just mentioned. I think that many that are in a non-entertainment marketing operations industry, they're out trying to find B2B buyers, they're doing lead generation, they're partnering with the sales, they're growing their businesses, et cetera. You're building trailers, your production activities, the bonus features in DVDs or iTunes streaming packages, et cetera. So, can you share some of those other sort of lessons that you've gained along the way to maximize awareness of the films, of the properties, the digital properties at Lionsgate, fan growth, revenue growth, et cetera?
Well, and funny enough, there's a little bit of crossover to, I want to say, kind of as you teed it up, a little bit of the traditional marketing operations when we talk about B2B and lead generation and so on and so forth. But yeah, predominantly my business is to create and prepare these materials such that they can be evergreen if we need them to be. We can go back to the well and repurpose those assets to bring those customers back in to experience our product. So again, if we want to release a title as a repertory title and put it back in theaters, we're going to dust off this trailer. We're going to dust off these TV spots and reprint that one sheet and do stuff like that. If we're going to create a line look from it and put it on the Walmart shelves or whatever, we need to make sure that there's enough art there that they can augment it as they need to. So it's really about building the material for the purpose, but then buying insurance by scaling it so that it can be reused, and of course storing it with the proper amount of metadata and so on and so forth, so that not only can my team access it again, but that and know what they're accessing, but then so too can our digital retailers and even our physical retailers. But another thing that we do that is that does sort of fit in that more traditional window, I want to say, of lead generation and traditional sales and so forth, is that we have customers like anybody else. We're going out to Walmart and to Best Buy and iTunes and whatnot, getting them excited about carrying our product. And so we are generating, sales sheets. We're doing decks. We're doing slides. We're giving these elements over to our sales teams to go execute those sales and generate that interest. Mm-hmm. So we're constantly trying to make sure that we can service any and all customers, whether it's the end consumer or the B2B buyer.
Yeah, the buyer, distributor, wholesaler. Yeah,
Yep.
that's an interesting tie. And I would imagine that in both of those environments that you just described, there's likely unique measurements in terms of how are you measuring the efficacy of your marketing operations efforts when you're going out to, as you say, to a Walmart, another distributor, your B2B clients versus the others. Now, you mentioned creating something as evergreen. That is maybe not a metric, that's more of an end goal. But are there other sort of key metrics that are top of mind for you that you are always looking at to make sure we have to be, in the top 25% quartile, the top of this environment, and those are the most important metrics. Are there rules of thumbs that you have sort of generated over the years that we have to be in such a space?
To some extent, yes. Oftentimes in the marketing operations side here in Hollywood, we're kind of at the affect of our creative team or our strategy team. They're deciding what they want. They're deciding what story they want to tell. And it's simply handed off to us and we have to go produce it, right? We produce and distribute the trailers, the TV spots, the print material. And it's, very few times is it sort of led by us. So we don't have those traditional measurements to sort of compare against, but we do have our measurements of how efficient we're being or how thoughtful we're being. And that is almost a measurement of what you don't see. And that is to say, if we're doing things right, you're going to see less overtime. If you're doing things right, you're going to see less assets in the dam. And we're being that much more efficient by what we're producing. The other thing that we get to see, and this comes as a result of our partnership with our international distributors, and it was the same way with my setup at Warner Brothers. Even though those offices were Warner Brothers offices, we were still able to see the efficiency of the marketing material that we were creating, because we were able to put these assets in the dam, and then we were able to see what they were pulling down and repurposing and versioning and putting back into the dam for that final mile delivery. And this was through using a global, TV spot distribution service. But we used that service and which doubled as our dam, and we could see what was being used. And so that was informative to us to go, oh, from a creative perspective, this part of the world likes this storyline, that part of the world likes that storyline. So on a similar genre title, we should be producing more of this stuff for that part, more of that stuff for that part. And then we should see, some really thoughtful and, and better utilization of the assets that we're creating. So instead of creating, 100 pieces of content, we could start to refine and create, 15 pieces for, Europe and, 20 pieces for Latin America. And we could see them getting used closer to 100%. Whereas before it could be everybody gets everything and they're using 30% of it.
And there's two things that I would imagine benefit you there, correct? Which is, number one, it's back to your comment about efficiency. It also probably makes the turnaround time or your speed to market faster, because now the distributor doesn't have to go in, pull something down, modify it, then re-upload it, because you've already done that work for them. So that helps the turnaround time for you. But then I also would imagine, because you're making it so much easier for the distributor now is much more likely, because you've made their job so much easier, they're much more likely to embrace the next movie, the next, digital property, et cetera, because you're just that much more easy to work with. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly it. And that's where we get into, certain situations where we're doing what are called all rights deals. We're selling the theatrical window as well as the home entertainment window and the streaming window. And in a lot of cases, you're selling those rights in advance of the movie even being produced. So you're front loading it, right? You're getting those, you're getting that revenue in, you're applying it to a production, and you're meeting these standards, and everybody's Hollywood is a lot of times a leap of faith, right? And so we're taking that in, and and we need to make sure that they have a good positive experience with us, that their consumers have a good positive experience, seeing our films, experiencing our films. And a lot of that starts with marketing, right? That's your entree into it. So anything we can do to leave people feeling good, feeling positive about the experience, it's going to pay, in spades down the line.
Yeah. And then in the creative process, in terms of creating the work, you were talking about the creative team and what their vision is, of a film, what have you. And then there's a transfer over to the marketing operations team. I reflect a bit about Google. Google, there is a distinct difference, sort of a very distinct wall between the organic search and search engine marketing, the actual advertising space. And there's, fundamentally a wall between the two. And, not just a strategic, but almost I don't want to call it ethical, but a desire to make sure that those two worlds don't intersect intentionally. Is it the same from a Hollywood perspective, in the sense that the creative group, once you get it, you might be modifying, to your point about, this distributor at an international environment might like this storyline more than another storyline, so therefore you'll be modifying your marketing that way. But is there the same sort of wall where creative creates and marketing operations fulfills, and there's very little crossover, or is there a lot of influence between the two, going back and forth? Here's what we're hearing in the audience. Here's what our distributors are saying, etc.
Right. There absolutely is tons of crossover, and in some ways, it's a bit of a soup, and it's to the outside, or to the outside observer, it might seem, like a bit of an orchestra where everybody's playing different instruments, and sometimes it might even sound like we're also playing different songs. But once you cut through the clutter and you understand the core of, what everybody's doing and what everybody's bringing to the table, it starts to become a little bit clearer. And so, yes, you've got creative working with the filmmaker. And again, this goes back to what I was talking earlier about, with respect to, our product isn't a thing, it's not a widget, it's an experience, and it's so closely tied to, especially on the heels of, the Oscars, tied to how the filmmaker feels about it. Because not only do we want those distributors to have a good experience with us and come buy more product from us, but we want the filmmakers to have a good experience with us and want to make more movies with us. Yeah. So we've got a lot of mouths to feed, and so therefore it requires a lot of expertise from a multitude of different categories. So creative, working with the filmmakers, making sure they're good; digital, listening to the audience, understanding what's going on in search, what's going on in organic, and feeding that back. Paid media, doing much the same, overlaying their search, results with digitals, and then of course, making sure that we're optimizing for whatever paid media opportunity we have available to us, whether it be outdoor or online or broadcast. And of course the earned media team, in publicity, doing all of their efforts and word of mouth screenings and influencer screenings and so on and so forth. All of that's got to be brought back, and it's got to be, processed. And that's where the strategy team really takes all that in and assimilates it all and makes sure that we're distilling it down to the core of what it needs to be. And it's that kind of alignment coupled with what the filmmaker's goals are that help us be as successful as we can be. And there are times when, what we're hearing our audiences say is in conflict with what we hear our filmmakers want. And so that's where you have to thread the needle, and that's where you have to be really well choreographed in your presentation to the powers that be. Mm-hmm. And those powers that be are, filmmakers. Sometimes they're studio leadership as well, all the way up to, the CEO, basically. So you just have to be really coordinated and able to, defend the position, because it's what's best for the property.
Yeah, right. So now, obviously, you're managing, on a global scale right now. But if you go back in your career, maybe you started, on a regional basis. Maybe you moved to a national basis. Now you're working on a global basis. What are some of the lessons that you have learned, when you make that jump to global responsibilities in marketing operations?
It's pretty wild. Hollywood, by and large, is kind of divided into domestic and international. If you're in a more sales or distribution type of function, you'll have greater subcategories of that. So you could be for the LATAM region, or you could be for the Southeast United States. But when you get into marketing, it's kind of either international, domestic, or global, right? You've basically got those three categories. And I actually, funny enough, started out on the international side, and I think that taught me a lot in terms of the sensibilities and the approach and how you interact with different regions, different sensibilities. And so what was kind of ironic about it is we then wound up, I want to say, sort of taking over domestic and taking that on. And I looked at it like a territory like anything else. It was just another country. It just happened to be the U.S. But then I learned very quickly that too has its own sensibilities, has its own, perspective on things, of course. And what I was able to adjust quickly because I was able to understand that it's about engaging that particular market and making them feel as special as they are, and allowing them the ability to influence what we're doing, whether it be at a national stage or an international stage. And a lot of that is, whether it's local talent, whether it's local outlets, local vendors, incorporate them into the process, and you're going to get greater buy-in, greater support, and greater amplification of your message, really.
That's wonderful advice, and I think that anyone that has that scope, I think that's a really good lesson. Is it's almost as if you don't have to do it alone. Take the advice, learn from the others, and bring that into your marketing efforts.
Exactly.
Now,
and one of the, sorry to interrupt, but one of the other things that's a part of that is understanding that just because you're based someplace doesn't mean that's the only place all of that can get done. And I think it's fair to say that Hollywood, up till recently, typically had an understanding that it all gets done here. All the key suppliers, all the key vendors, all the key artists, everybody is here. And one of the things that I learned coming over from international to domestic or global, there are quality vendors all over the globe that you could be using. And, what's great about it is a lot of what I'm doing is IP based, right? Or it's not a physical good. And so it's easy to ship it anywhere. So, I'm doing a lot of stuff out of London. I was doing a lot of stuff. I mean, it's, in the IT industry, right? So much of it, has been coming out of India and that sort of thing. And it's all very, very valuable, high quality, work product. And so from, Malaysia to London to India, and, unfortunately, Ukraine, there was a lot of people that have been, supplying us, great work product over the years. And I think that, for anybody holding a leadership position, you should be thinking about where's the best in class, and be agnostic of where that location is, because chances are you'll find just as good, if not better, work product at perhaps just as good, or oftentimes a better price than what you're doing in your local area, because that's what you've done all this time. You know what I mean? So.
Well, yeah, and I know for example, at Taylor Corporation, we have operations, of course, here domestically in the United States, but we have operations in Bulgaria, we have operations in India, operations in China, and in the Philippines. And so for us, it allows us to operate really as a 24-hour marketing team, a 24-hour operational team. And so I would imagine, to your point, by leveraging those other international markets and the partners that are there, it's one of those things that, again, just accelerate your cycle time. Would you think?
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can follow the sun, and somebody's always working. Somebody's always outputting stuff for you, and you're going to be that much more efficient for it.
Yeah, yeah. Now, when we chatted before, Russ, you mentioned that you had an interesting description. You said marketing operations is not the hub of the wheel, but that marketing operation is where the rubber meets the road. So can you unpack that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's funny, as you develop in your career, right? You're trying to figure out your identity to some extent. And I, was fortunate enough, perhaps in my late 20s and early 30s to have enough of a seat at the table that I was able to do a lot of observation. And that's where I would witness that so many people in positions of leadership were kind of vying for being that hub of the wheel, so to speak. And I didn't take umbrage to it. I didn't think, well, gosh, we're doing some pretty cool stuff. Why aren't we being considered for that, or something similar? And I realized, what, we don't need that. We're kind of in the shadows. We're the backstage. We're helping everybody else do what they do faster, better, smarter, cheaper. And that's really where we belong. And so in that regard, I kind of thought of ourselves as a bit of an internal vendor. So we are the suppliers to the creative team, to the media team, to the publicity team, and so on. And as I thought about that, I thought, well, that means we're kind of the final stop. And in particular for our group, that is really true, because, all the music clearances got to go through us, all the credits and clearances, making sure that we're contractually compliant with whatever the personal service agreements are. Putting it in a DAM where everybody can access it, actually producing it, making sure that the trailer is color correct and mixed correctly, and so on and so forth. We're that final stop before any of these assets head out the door. And so that made me think, well, gosh, all these people can be the hub of the wheel, but unless that wheel is connected to the ground somehow, you're not going anywhere anyway. So we like to sort of think of ourselves as helping this organization get to where it needs to go.
Oh, that's a wonderful description. Thanks for sharing that. So, Ross, what issues keep you up at night?
Well, admittedly, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this. I've been a part of organizations where there's too few people doing too many things, and I've seen other organizations where there's too many people doing too few things. I've always been frustrated by those, and mostly these have been suppliers where you notice a lot of people, but you don't notice a whole lot of output. Those are frustrating. But for us, I would say it's about having the internal resources to get what I need done. And I have a lot of designs. I have a lot of ideas. And more importantly, I have people who work with me who have even more designs and even greater ideas. And I want to help those people realize those goals and aspirations. But they got to do their day job. I got to do my day job. And it's really hard to dedicate resources to that. So that's probably what keeps me up at night, is achieving these goals, particularly for an operation that's a little bit small. I mean, we are smaller by comparison to the other studios, but we're putting out product that's just as good, and just as capable of the massive box office numbers that you see. But we don't have enough bodies to get these things done. And I think after COVID, I think a lot of, larger organizations are feeling the same kind of thing. So I'd say that's what keeps me up at night. Because otherwise we've got really good systems in place. Maybe they could be developed a little bit more, right? Our utilization of, say, Monday.com, for instance, could be more sophisticated, more robust. But you have to walk that line of how complicated or how complex and sophisticated you can make something and still make it user friendly. And so we need to do that, but that requires some brainstorming, some ideation, and some development, and just need a little bit of time to do that. And that's the part that's like, oh, if I could just get 2 or 3 months that I could really drill down on a lot of these things, throw a couple of team members at it, and really get solid on these things, then we could roll this out and everybody could adopt. But in the absence of that, we've got these things. They're good enough, but they're not yet great. Yeah. And I think that's the thing. But I don't want to say that, full stop, only because, there's a phrase I like to say, great is sometimes the enemy of good. And, you have to be careful of just how great you're trying to make things, because, good might be all that you need, and all that your organization can tolerate. But, until I can get, some dedicated resources on these things, I'm not going to know, right? I'm not going to know that limit, that line. And so that's what I think about a lot.
Wonderful. Ross, as we wrap up today's episode, what is the one most important takeaway about marketing operations that you want to leave?
I think it goes back to, sort of the thematic elements I've been talking about the whole time, which is helping those around you do what they do better, faster, smarter, cheaper, and being thoughtful and holistic about the approach. And a rising tide floats all boats. And so whatever you can do to help those around you, help the other disciplines, help the other departments, help the other organizations around you, succeed, you'll succeed. That's kind of, that's my approach to it, that their success is ultimately my success.
Excellent advice. Well, that wraps up this episode of The Art of Marketing Operations. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ross. Until next time, stay safe, take care, and thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to The Art of Marketing Operations, brought to you by Taylor. Don't forget to hit subscribe in your favorite podcast player. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and share. Until next time.